Texas FFA, Larry Gock representing the men and women at Ford Motor Company. I want to thank all the vocational ag teachers for the incredible work you do helping FFA students succeed in the classroom and in the community. We have been national FFA partners since long before I was born, yet I am most proud of the contributions Ford has made to the Texas FFA, highlighted by our incredible Ford Leadership Scholar Program. 110 FFA students have earned a Ford Leadership Scholarship over the past decade, and importantly, they have had a unique opportunity to work closely with a mentor, develop a sustainable project, and implement that project in their community. Seeing the results of these projects is exactly why I love supporting the Texas FFA. I wish we could be together for the 2020 annual convention, and while this pandemic will pass, your experiences from being part of Texas FFA and representing that blue jacket that you so proudly wear will last you a lifetime. I look forward to seeing you in a leadership position down the road, and hopefully you'll be driving a Ford.
Well, hello, Texas FFA. This is Aaron Alejandro with the Texas FFA Foundation, and we're here in our leadership series, Growing Our Future. And part of that series, we're trying to find subject matter experts that can bring expert insight and content on matters that we may face as leaders, both at the chapter level, district area, and state level, both as students and as ag teachers. So today's topic is on crisis management. Crisis management. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands because I'm sure this is going to be seen in some classrooms, but how many people saw COVID-19 coming? Probably not. We for many of us, we were in meetings when we heard the news of the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Sometimes we just have to play the hand that we're dealt. And having experts that can help us prepare for that, study those opportunities in terms of how to respond professionally, articulately, and with credibility, I think is very important. So we've put together a panel today of some subject matter experts who have extensive experience in dealing with crisis. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I'm honored to have this group join us. I appreciate them sharing some of their time, talents, and expertise with our 139,000 Texas FFA members. So with that, we'll start with Amy Power. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is a really cool last name, and it's also the name of my company, the Power Group. So we are proud to represent the Texas FFA in terms of telling your stories and helping promote convention and other events. My background is in public relations primarily. We've been in business 20 years, and we are experts in crisis management.
Okay. Carmen.
My name is Carmen Fenton. I am the Director of Communications for the Texas Cattle Feeders Association. We're based here in Amarillo. I was an FFA girl, grew up on a ranch, grew up in White Deer, but my family raised a small cow-calf herd outside of White Deer, and my background is in ag communications, and so that's what I've been doing for the past 15 years.
Very good. Gary.
Thank you, Aaron. Hello, I'm Gary Joyner. I'm with the Texas Farm Bureau, the general farm organization based in Waco. I'm the Director of Communications. Fell into that position in January of 2020, but been with the organization over 20 years in some other capacities. Over 30 years working for organizations that represent those that work the land, either as farmers and ranchers or those that make their living, perhaps in other capacities, stewarding the land. So it's great to be here today, Aaron. Thank you for the opportunity. And crisis communications, what a great topic.
Very good. Well, let's jump in. Okay, I'm an FFA member. I'm an ag teacher, and I have experienced a crisis. Now let's kind of dissect and unpack what that might mean. That might mean that it might be my crisis. Maybe as an FFA member or an ag teacher, I said or did something that has caused some concern. Maybe it's my chapter's crisis. Maybe there's something that happened in our chapter that's caught the attention and maybe being spun with a negative light. Let's talk through what are some steps that an individual and an organization can go through to deal with, mitigate, and respond appropriately to crisis. And we'll go the same direction if that's okay. Amy, we'll start with you.
Well, I think you have to first name the problem. You know, what's really going on around you. And you have to be really open and honest about what you're seeing and what's happening. So giving it a name, you know, also gives you something to work around. Crisis in the word, the etymology of the word, it's Greek, and so it means like decision point or a point of decision. And so that's the other thing. You have to decide, okay, what am I going to do next? And then how am I going to go about, you know, fixing or making it better? That would be my initial, you know, there's a lot more to it in terms of the steps, but I'd love to hear from the other panelists.
Yeah, so just, I think what Amy just said, you know, the very first thing you have to do is define the problem. I mean, give it a name, figure out what the crisis is before you can even begin to prepare to respond. And once you do that, I think as a communicator, what's incredibly important is informing yourself about the situation. You know, so many times as PR professionals, we tend to know, you know, this much about this much, and that's enough for us to talk about it. But when you're responding to a crisis, it's incredibly important for you to be able to speak confidently and to answer questions effectively and efficiently. And to do that, you're going to have to know what you're talking about more than just an inch deep. And so, you know, you may not always be the one, and like in my experience, I may not always be the one on camera or responding on social, but it's important for me to understand what the facts are so I can help direct the appropriate spokesperson. And then deciding who that appropriate spokesperson is another big decision. That person must be credible, sincere, and they must be the one to deliver the appropriate message depending on what that crisis is. So, you know, that's kind of the steps that we would take first, and all this would happen in, you know, a few hours. So it's definitely it's a fast and you know, stressful thing, but if you have your ducks in a row, it can be done rather smoothly. So I'll pitch that to you, Gary. Next.
Real quick, can I jump in here real quick? Because you just said something I think that is a good point. I think that you said something that I hope people picked up on, and that is when you are faced with that crisis, take a deep breath. Just that moment of pause may offer a moment of clarity to make sure that you begin this process that y'all are articulating very well. So anyway, Carmen, that was good. Gary, go right ahead.
And Aaron, that deep breath may be something you did 6 months or a year earlier in a planning process. Maybe you sat down and thought about some of the possibilities, the people that you have that can meet some of the expectations that Carmen outlined, that are credible, that are authoritative, that can speak with confidence, address an issue at the time of hand. Those that fail to plan sometimes plan to fail, right? We've heard that. So there's nothing wrong with trying to think about what that crisis mechanism is and the plan that's in place. So when it does occur, and in that moment's notice of trying to figure out 50 things at one time, what comes first, maybe you set aside a little bit of a checklist, a little bit of a document that you can pull off the shelf, pull out of the file. Okay, here's what we need to do first. Here's what we need to think about. Let's not overreact. Let's not jump to some conclusions. There'll be some things that kind of help you steady your feet a little bit and kind of give you a little bit of pause and a chance. Sometimes no response is the best response when you're evaluating information and you're trying to gather all the facts and all the information that you need. So there are many out there that you can pull from that are kind of template. that help you maybe in a crisis mode, a plan that you can kind of fill in the blank and help with. I encourage folks to look at that. Every organization I've been with has kind of dedicated at least some time to that process. So we kind of know what to expect when the time arrives.
That's excellent. So let's make it even more real. I mean, again, I'm a big believer. All the students and all the teachers that have ever heard me speak know that I'm always telling them, if you want to be the best, train with the best. That's just good common sense. I'm looking at a panel of what I would consider subject matter experts. Gary, I know what y'all dealt with at the Texas Farm Bureau. Carmen, I know what happens in the world of animal agriculture. And Amy, I can't imagine all that you've dealt with in the world of business. So I'm looking at a panel of what I consider the best. So with that, let's start with Amy. Amy, what would be an example of a crisis that you've had to deal with, that you've had to help coach somebody on, and how did you manage that and help them get through that?
Wow. There's been about 5 of those this week. But there's so many, like my mind almost goes blank, to be honest. But I think the best thing I can share is that with one particular instance this week, the gentleman did not follow my advice. He wanted to issue his own statement. He wanted to bring in a third party to speak on his behalf. And as a result of that, and not following our guidance and best practices in crisis management, the situation has now he's now lost a significant business partnership. There are protests happening in front of the business, and a whole slew of other things. But, time is of the essence. 20 years ago, we probably did have a couple of hours to respond. I would argue that now you've got seconds, because of social media. The first response, what you say initially and what you do, it will set the course for how this is going to either get worse or get better. And we can talk later if there's time about what a good response is and what's wrapped up in that. I'm sure Gary and the other panelists, have been down this road as well. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Carmen will give us an example. I can't imagine that y'all haven't dealt with anything in animal agriculture. So what might be an example of crisis and how you responded?
Yeah, we have for years dealt with the same, when you look back, it's actually the same things over and over. So we've kind of perfected the crisis. It wouldn't even be considered a crisis, I don't think, anymore. But one thing recently we dealt with, we've had some investigative reporters who have written about feed yard dust. So dust on a feed yard, blown around in the Texas Panhandle, and it's a tricky situation because some of that particulate matter, dust, has fecal matter in it from cattle, and there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, and there is a lot of explaining that has to be done in order to remedy a headline that says, feed yards have dust with cow manure blowing around everywhere, and that's bad for, the public health and all that stuff. So, when we have this, it's kind of what Amy said. We really only have seconds to respond, because I usually get a call that the reporter is actually on the feed yard, and it's obviously kind of isolated, but that's when we get wind of it. So, we are very proud of what we do in agriculture, and the first thing that I coach my folks on is, let's not pretend that it's not dusty in the Panhandle, or let's not pretend that there's not dust, and let's talk about why that is, and what we do as a feed yard, and let's not there are times when we will not cooperate with the reporter because we know what the intent is and the outcome is, and we don't want to put our members on record. But there are just as many times when we know the outcome will likely not be pleasant, but we want to be a part of it because it is so important when you're dealing with the crisis. You're not trying to get, I always talk about the 80-20. I'm not trying to get people to necessarily love me or my association or even, the beef industry. I'm trying to get them to understand. I'm trying to have reasonable people understand what a responsible business does. And so why is there dust? Well, this is why, and sometimes that stuff doesn't translate the way you would want it to in print. But I firmly stand behind that. Like, we can't hide from what we do. We're proud of what we do. We're proud of the way we do it. We don't, my members are moms and dads and aunts and uncles, and they care about the environment and they care about the food that they produce, just like the people reading the story would be. So we strive to be really transparent and sincere and tell the truth and honest, and we don't shy away from what we do. And I think that particularly, and I know I'm rambling here, but in today's social stratosphere, that sincerity and that honesty comes through. And I think that carries as much weight as a perfectly written, press release. Obviously, there are different times that are more appropriate, but that's just kind of been how we've navigated these waters, and it's worked. It doesn't always come out in our favor. It's not easy to say hard things, but I do believe when we look back, time will tell that the facts were on our side, and you can tell that we care about what we do and the people that do it for us and that we produce food for. And really, that's what agriculture is about. So it's a really long answer, Aaron. Sorry.
No, and I think, I really do. When you listen to you and Amy, and I know Gary, both, all of us, when you've had experience, our minds are shuffling through all of those moments that we've actually acted on everything that we're sharing here. So there's a lot of good aggregated data right here in this group right here. So Gary, tell us about a time where you've had a crisis and how did y'all respond to it?
I think we just have to talk about maybe a month and a half ago, when images of milk being dumped, images of empty meat cases in areas of the country prompted kind of a response from national and international media saying, what has happened to the U.S. food supply? And the public began to react and began to question or have concerns that perhaps the U.S. food supply had been compromised, and oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? So we knew there was a message. We knew we needed to communicate with the general public through the media that was calling us from the New York Times on down, asking what Texas farmers and ranchers had to say or thought about the circumstances at hand. So we identified the audience, we identified the message, we identified our spokesperson, and we began to communicate it is not so much a food supply shortage as it is a processing pitch. There's food, there's ample supplies. We've just had interruptions in processing at many levels because of the COVID-19 impacts that were causing some of these surplus products not to reach the consumer as they were intended. And one of the bottom messages that we continued to iterate was, this is the last thing a farmer and rancher wanted to do, whether it be a livestock animal, whether it be milk that was produced, a crop that's not harvested because there's not a processor to take those commodities that need to be processed right away. They're very perishable. They're left in the field or plowed under. And we began to articulate this is not the option that any producer, farmer, rancher wants to do, but it's the circumstances at hand, and here's what we know, and here's where we think we can recover. And it took time, and that message probably over 3 to 4 weeks began to reverberate, and people began to understand and began to realize the circumstances. So a crisis communication that wasn't our doing, it wasn't something that we had unintentionally created on our own, but it was a larger issue that the public needed to know about. And the media began to question, and hopefully we added to that conversation. A lot of times we talk about not educating the public, but engaging the public, getting the public to engage in a conversation, check out a social post, watch a 30-second video, hear a pulled quote from somebody that's in agriculture, read it, understand it. Maybe you get a window of opportunity to kind of help them understand better what's going on. So we had some pretty good engagement because the issue was so high profile, and hopefully we contributed to that conversation.
That is excellent, Gary, and you just hit on something that I think is a positive that comes out of crisis, and that is our opportunity to communicate a positive message. And I agree with you. One of the things that we've been talking to ag teachers about throughout this last spring semester and where we're at now is if there's ever been a time, because like you said, Gary, the public does not want to be educated. So right now is an opportunity for agricultural literacy. And if there's ever been an opportunity to talk about production and consumption, it is right now. Because we're not going to school, and we're not driving to our restaurants, and we're not on airplanes and cruise ships and concerts and venues and vacations, and everything in the supply chain was built around consumption. This is a great opportunity to talk about agricultural literacy all the way down to the person that puts the corn in the ground for feed. I mean, this is an incredible moment in time, and maybe it took the crisis and our response to create the opportunity. But I really appreciate that, Gary, because you are absolutely right. And we did respond well. I would tell you the Farm Bureau and all of your stakeholders did an outstanding job of responding to that. We wished everybody knew how to digest that information, but at least it's being articulated in a way where it's easy to assimilate. So real quick, let's go one more round robin here. Give us your best tips on crisis management. If you were going to give an ag teacher or a student some tips, tell them here's what you would do. Some of y'all already alluded to some of those, but what would that be?
Do you want me to go, Aaron?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, time is of the essence. So everybody's hit on these themes, time, being calm, and also, Aaron, you almost said it, in every crisis there's an opportunity, and that's the mantra at my office. So keeping those things in mind, but really in response, and I'm going to move through this quickly, it acknowledges the situation, we name the problem, it shows empathy, it goes back to your values, which I know the Texas FFA is very clear about their values. It talks about the approach they're going to take. For example, we won't let this happen again. And what are we committed to? So the acronym AEVAC, if that's something that a teacher can just remember and bring into their classroom or their structure, those are the fundamentals of a really well-crafted statement. And again, time matters. So I know Carmen already addressed that, but that would be my best tip for today.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen?
Yeah, so I agree with all of what Amy just said. That's very valuable. The other thing, and particularly in this social media world that so many students find themselves in, teachers, really all of us, it's important to make sure you're communicating to the 80% of reasonable people out there. And don't let, can I say this word? The trolls and the haters dictate how you communicate. Reasonable people don't type in all caps, they don't lie, they don't threaten, they don't shout all the time. And just make sure that you're spending your time and being sincere and transparent and consistent to reach the 80% of reasonable people who are not on your social page all the time. So remember that, that don't be pushed by the 20%.
That's excellent. Gary?
I think a tip, Aaron, would be not to overshoot your own people, your own parents, your own students, your own school leaders, industry leaders, as you begin to try to communicate to this larger public out there that has a need to know. Don't forget who also you need to communicate among your own team, among those that you're with every day, that are closely associated with your project or your association or group. Don't forget to keep them apprised and communicate with them. And sometimes you can overshoot your audience. You can forget or fail to communicate with those that in some cases really need to know first and really need to know some of the true response that you've developed. Circle back. Think about those folks that support you, that are part of your team, that have that need to know while you're communicating with this larger public. Because it's very easy to get out in front of folks, and all of a sudden the people that you count on most supporting you and being part of your response, they don't know. They haven't been told. They haven't gotten the email. They haven't gotten the message that you've developed for this larger public out there. And all of a sudden, not everybody's connected. So keep your group connected. Think about who else needs to know other than the main target audience that you're trying to address and talk to, and keep everybody connected, and that will help going forward.
That's good. One thing that I think when I'm listening to the dialogue that's here, there's a couple of other webinars that we're doing that I really think are going to play into this one. One, we do talk about resiliency. If there's one thing in the world of agriculture that we have to be, and that is resilient. There's a lot of curves that we get thrown, whether it be drought, disease, just flooding. There's so many things in the world of agriculture that you're just got to have to deal with. And just like in life, we've got to learn to be resilient. Crisis is going to come. We just can't let that crisis define us. We've got to be resilient in how we respond and come out of that. And I think it helps when we've got third-party experts that can help kind of shed light on that. But resiliency is a big thing. And then we'll also have another workshop on advocacy. And so much of what we do, it's sometimes I share with the teachers, a lot of times we wait until we're in the middle of a legislative session and now we've got to run to Austin and tell everybody what's wrong. And I'm like, well, let's see, we had 364 days to make ourselves relevant. And now we're going to try to figure it all out, because we're under the gun. And so while I appreciate the fact that you're subject matter experts in crisis management, there's probably a lot that we can do in training, in preparedness, that we might not ever have to have, hopefully, the expertise of crisis managers. So, I do appreciate everyone's perspective on that. Amy, you gave us the acronym a while ago. If you would you email that to me? Anything like that y'all have in terms of tips, I will include that in the notes for this webinar so our teachers and students can get that. And we'll go around one last time here. Amy, is there anything else you'd like to share with Texas FFA members and our agricultural science teachers?
Wow, I could talk all day about this topic. Crisis is really just it can be such a big distraction, and it's so when it happens, oftentimes it can be prevented. I think, to Gary's point, doing the hard work up front, really spending the time to think about what could go wrong, what are the worst case situations, what's the worst thing that could be happening, the worst question I could be asked. If you plan for those events, if they happen, you will have the mental readiness and the calm to deal with them. So, panic facilitates really bad decisions, and crisis moves so fast. I would just encourage people to really take the time to do the hard work early, so that you don't have to do it in the moment.
Excellent. Carmen?
Yeah, so I always, when we talk about crisis anymore, I always talk about Southwest Airlines and how they've gotten to a point where they have such a loyal customer base, that when they face a crisis, it's the people they feel it with them. Their consumers go through that crisis with that company. And I think that has a lot to do with the story that they've told over, the past how many decades since they've been around. And so as speaking to FFA students and ag teachers in agriculture, we have to cultivate that same type of loyalty. And we have a leg up because of who we are. And so I would just say, strategic communicators, they kind of speak the truth into power. So let's advocate. I know that's a totally different session, but let's talk about what we do, and let's be honest and transparent, and let's be who we are every day, and do the right thing and tell the truth and be consistent. And then when those crises do come up, we'll be ahead of the game, because we've already got that part on our side. So don't ever discount talking about who you are and your industry and what you do on a daily basis, because when push comes to shove, that will be reflected in how you manage, or the outcome of how you've managed a crisis.
Very good. Gary.
Let's talk about managing information. Let's talk about how you decide what should be said and what shouldn't. The temptation a lot of times is to try to tell everything you know. It's so good, I have so much information, let's just get it all out there. The truth is sometimes less is more. When you're responding, when you're making a strategic decision to allow information to go forward, less is more in many cases. And how you do that is just what is essential, what's the most important. What's the key takeaway we hope this message or this response will generate from the audience that we're trying to reach? And sometimes how you best manage information is by managing the individuals who are delivering those responses and those messages. Have you designated one person within your FFA chapter or within your group that can serve as a spokesperson for this event, that has the credibility, the authority, the experience, perhaps, visibility, to say with credibility and transparency what our response is? And please know that sometimes no response is the appropriate response. Don't feel like you have to engage and be party to conversations that may not be in your lane, that may not be the true mission and work of your organization. Let that conversation evolve, let it go forward, make some decisions later whether you should step in and be a part of that conversation. Right now, everybody's in a gotcha mentality. Everybody's looking to bring a spotlight to an organization, to an individual, perhaps that stepped out of their lane, that seems to be contrary to the norm where they should be. So everyone's looking at opportunities for that, and it's unfortunate. It has, in some cases, stifled conversation engagement. It's caused groups and individuals to be hesitant to participate in public discussions because of that very real threat. And FFA leaders know people are watching you, know people are listening to you. They're evaluating your statements, they're evaluating your responses, whether it's a like or a share or some type of emoji on a social media post. That must mean they support it, they oppose it. That must mean that they have a true opinion on this topic, when maybe it was never intended to be presented that way. That's how it's perceived. So it's a difficult time. 2020, I think, is unprecedented in terms of the amount of public inspection of the work of agriculture organizations, of the Texas FFA. More people are wanting to know about what you do and how you do it and why you do it than ever before. And some are trying to find inconsistencies. They're trying to find reasons to point to irregularities or inappropriateness. So be cautious, be careful, manage your information, manage your reaction to things that are on a larger scale, conversations that are happening that are well beyond our own control. There's temptations to join in, but you do so with some risk. So be mindful of that and practice organizational discipline. Practice those things that make sure that you're doing what's right when it needs to be done, and use the leadership and use those that are around you to help make those good decisions when those decisions need to be made.
Well, I couldn't put a better bow on it than that, Gary. That one of the things that we talk about all the time with students, and Amy has been in some of the workshops that we participated in. I'm real big on sharing with students, and I know you're listening right now, so I'm going to share it again. Live your brand. And that consistency that Carmen talked about, I always tell people consistency creates credibility. It doesn't mean we won't have hiccups along life's highway. We're all going to have hiccups along life's highway, but that staying in your lane and living your brand, and what are the 3 things that people know you for? And in the world of FFA and agriculture, it ought to be agriculture, youth, and leadership. That's what we ought to be talking about, agriculture, youth, and leadership. When you think about FFA, agriculture, youth, and leadership. And I think when we do that, I don't know what I did here.
We can hear you.
Can you see that on my screen? Why is that?
Nope, haven't shared a thing.
There it goes. It just went away. I hit something on my screen and a big box popped up.
You almost had crisis.
Anyway, living our brand, being consistent. When I think about all of the farmers and ranchers that are represented by the Texas Farm Bureau, when I think about all the cattle brands that are represented through, the folks that make their way to the Texas cattle feeders, Amy, all the brands that you work with in the world of business, there's a lot of sweat equity. There's a lot that has gone into building those brands. And those brands, I believe, are successful, to Gary's point, because they stayed in their lane. They stayed consistent to what their brand represents. And so I'm hopeful, as students and teachers are listening to this, so much of what we're talking about is prevention. It's not always about responding to the crisis at hand. But if you are faced with the crisis, you just heard from some great experts, some tips on how to do that. So with that, I'll sign us off here real quick to stay on for a moment. But thank you all for sharing your expertise with our Texas FFA members and teachers. We appreciate you, and we thank you. And together, we're making Texas a better place to live, work, and raise our families. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Hi, y'all. It's Scott Grant with Ducks Unlimited. Ducks Unlimited has been a supporter of the FFA for many years. By supporting FFA, we help to ensure the future success of Ducks Unlimited and our overall conservation mission. The work we do goes hand in hand with the many things FFA members will have to face in their future. It's important for us that you as students understand not only the conservation ecology issues, but also your personal roles as future stewards of the land. Again, Ducks Unlimited is proud to be a partner with the FFA. I encourage you to stay engaged with us and check us out at ducks.org or one of the many social media platforms for more information. Thank you.
Hey, Texas FFA members, be sure to tune in for the 92nd Annual Texas FFA Convention. Strive for greatness. Strive to be great. We know you are. Hey, while you're at convention, be sure to check out the Foundation's virtual scavenger hunt. We're going to be giving away a $1,000 award scholarship every day from the students who get all of the scavenger hunt questions correct. So be sure to take a chance. Go to mytexasffa.org. Good luck.